Silk painting for the very beginners. Step by step, I'll guide you through the whole process, making mistakes that you will try to avoid. It will be very easy to repeat and still not primitive. There are special sliding frames for silk painting, but absolutely any frame will do for the very start. Maybe your beloved grandma has unwanted picture in the attic with a frame that you can take off and try to paint your first artwork on it. The easiest way to stretch silk is to use buttons. There are special silk buttons, but we will use simple ones. Or you can use rubber band hooks or rubber band clips. Or you can even use paper tapes with pins. I will demonstrate all the options. I have the simplest frame. The silk is satin and it's hemmed on one side, also to show the different options. If you are using buttons, your silk should be larger than the frame size. In other cases, opposite smaller. The first two edges I'm going to stretch with the buttons. I connect the corner of the silk to the corner of the frame and put the first button. Then I pull back the silk and put the second button. Then I divide the side in about half and put the button in the center plus minus, and so on each time. I don't show how to cut the silk evenly in this video, but I have a short video in my channel on how to do it. So I go back to the initial button, pull the silk away again and repeat the whole process. I like to work on tight silk, so I try to pull it as tight as possible. I don't stick the buttons all the way in. It will be clear why a bit later. For stretching the third side, I choose clips and hooks. But I don't have enough tension. I will try to fix it later. There is one more method. I got it on the Ours for All channel. I will leave the link to the video in the description. Thanks to Anastasia for this method. I have never seen it before and I like this idea. So we will test it also today. That was me pulling too hard, but it's okay. Still, I don't like the tension. It's too weak for me. So I decided to try attaching the hook to the frame with a button. That seemed much better to me. So I'm going to retension the whole side by removing the rubber bands from the hooks and clips. I would recommend to avoid straight lines creating a design, especially if you are not an artist and your hand is not steady. Irregular geometry, I think, is the best for the start. For drawing the design, you need the right size paper for the pattern. I have it bigger, so I bend the edges, focusing on the size of the silk, but making the paper a little smaller. So it will be easier to pin the design and move the composition if it's needed. But maybe you don't have a large sheet of paper. It can be taped together with several small ones. This is a regular A4 paper. I just taped it together with a paper tape. And let me work with you on it. and draw my design. First, on the back side, I will show the sketch. My silk format is almost square. I propose to make 2 rows of separate irregular shapes close to a square or rectangle, in which we will learn different techniques of painting. I connect them, and in the center I place the fish, the emperor angelfish. But don't be afraid, it's very easy to draw. Later you'll see for yourself. But if your composition is horizontal, you can draw 2 fish and make them narrower. And you can turn them to each other or in the same direction or even in different directions, as you like. But if your composition is vertical, the fish can be made more round. It all depends on the size of your silk or the size of your frame in choosing your composition. This is me outlining the margins beyond which the pattern will not go. You should always take into account that the silk will either be hemmed or stretched on the frame like a painting, and that the pattern will not be cropped. For this you need at least 2 centimeters on each side. Look, this is kind of the central axis of the fish, and the tail and the mouth are on it. First the basic shape. And now I'm adjusting it to the character of this particular fish. In order to make the design better visible through the silk, I trace it with a marker, and I correct the drawing a little bit and make the fish more snub-nosed. Now you just should carefully draw this pattern on it. Don't worry if you get the proportions a little wrong. It's not big deal. This is where the fish has stripes. They're too thin. I'll make them thicker later. This is what I'm showing you how much can go on the hemming or on the frame, but that's in case your silk isn't hemmed. Now the design needs to be pinned to the silk. I use regular pins. But still the drawing is not visible, and I usually put a couple of books under the drawing. In order to transfer the drawing to silk, you can use a simple pencil, a marker that washes off with water, or a marker that disappears after a couple of hours. Let's try all 3 of them. This one is a marker that washes off with water. This one will fade on its own. And the pencil. But the pencil stays on the silk even after washing. I'll show you that later. But actually I usually skip this step and go straight through the drawing with the resist. A couple of words about resist. Some call it Gouda outliner, but I say resist. They shape your design and they keep the paint from flowing outside this outline. They may be solvent-based and acrylic, water-based. They're usually sold in special tubes that you can use to apply the resist. And they could be different colors. You can choose the one which fits better for your idea. They also can be transparent, but I'm cautious about transparent resists, and I told in this video why. And I chose black for this project. My resist, or gutta, whatever you call it, is acrylic, and I apply it with a special tube which has a rather thin tip, but there are metal nozzles of different diameters that you can screw on. This one is 0.9 millimeters. With them, the line turns out more neat. And this is me showing the process in real time. It's important that the resist line goes all the way through the silk. I'll show you later what if that doesn't happen. With the paper tissue, you can remove the resist drops, and you need to avoid such gaps and recircle them immediately. If you can do it, then lead the line without interruption. It will be nicer. And hold your hands so that you feel comfortable, and make sure not to smudge the resist already applied. When you try to draw a perfect line and it doesn't come out, then all the imperfections become visible. But if you draw a deliberately curved line, the irregularities of the line will not be visible. So I said that irregular geometry is ideal for beginners. I will also draw wavy lines in one figure. I have decided not to draw this line yet. Resist should definitely dry well before you start painting. And if I think I might need resist later, I stick a pin in a tube and I rinse the tip with water so it doesn't get blocked. Or I can cover it with a cap, but without the pin in it. Still, I feel that I don't have enough tension in the silk, so I decided to make it tighter. Paints for painting silk and other fabric are divided into big groups. There are dyes, which need to be steamed. They impregnate the whole deep into the fabric and have no influence on its elasticity. And there are acrylic paints, they are water-based, and they are fixed on fabric by ironing. And they cover the fabric with thin film, and therefore the fabric loses its elasticity a little bit. And acrylic paints are divided in two groups. They are textile paints for any fabric, including silk, and there are acrylic paints specifically for painting silk. They are quite liquid and spread well on silk. It is said that you need special medium to dilute them, but I will dilute them with water, as I usually do, and we will see if they retain their strength after washing. This is liquid silk paint. The others are called textile paints. I have here water, red carmine, magenta, blue, lemon yellow and dark purple. The plate is a palette, porous paper to dry the brush, and I will start painting from the fish, because I'm more used to painting from the center. But you'd better try in squares first, to get a feel of how your paints lay down. but I'll return to it a bit later. I will start with the tail and yellow. And I like to vary the color, and I will make the yellow a warm color. But you can paint as you like, with or without variations. Now I'm going to add a cool yellow, and it's almost green. You see, the textile paints themselves don't flow on silk, they have to be rubbed on the surface of the silk. You can try painting with both paints, and in time it will become clear which paints you like better. Maybe you'd like the special silk paints more. It looks like it makes more sense to use those that say for silk, but I like to experiment. This is the first. And second, is silk a textile? It definitely is. And thus, textile paints are also good for silk. Now the blue stripes. In the center of the fish I make them lighter and brighter. And closer to the edges I add purple. I repeat, it's not necessary to change the color, but I welcome variety and picturesqueness, and it always makes the image more complex, interesting, and more professional too. I don't tell you how the colors are mixed, because you can see it on the palette, but if you are interested in the subject of color mixing, let me know in the comments below. And I also remember that I promised to talk about composition. I'm getting ready for this video, and sooner or later it will appear on the channel. Here I want to rub the borders of the stripes. And now the rectangles. Still, I should start with them. In this, the simplest basic painting techniques will be shown. And the first of them, I just take any color with a brush and paint, starting from the corner. I dig the brush in water and paint further. The color comes out lighter. I dip the brush in water again, and then I paint again. Eventually, the opposite corner is almost colorless. And then you can make the transitions smoother. The second method is to paint on wet silk. First I wet it, distribute the water evenly, and then add paint. Actually, I could have changed the water, but I hope you'll do that. On the second side, you can add a different color. And you get a gradient. Sometimes I blend colors on the palette, sometimes on silk. Here we have 3 colors. When mixing in this place, I got a gray color. And this is where the resist doesn't hold the paint. I explain the reasons why it happens in this video. As you can see, sometimes it helps to dry this place with a paper tissue. Look, this is textile paint. And this is for silk. It spreads itself very well. The blue paint didn't overlap the magenta, but it added depth to that color. Another way to paint quite liquidly in spots, and the paints themselves will blend on the silk. You get beautiful soft transitions. Or you can add a stronger color to them. At this point, the paint has flowed backwards. I will clean it up again with a tissue. In this rectangle, I will paint in stripes. You can practice and see how your paint mixes, what colors you get when you mix. When the first piece is almost dry, I add another gradient in another direction. I just wanted to show more possibilities. A more complicated version. There's plenty of room for experimentation. and I can make more specific shapes. The background will be gray, for which I used black silk paint, which, as we remember, is more liquid. I changed the brush to a flat bristle one. It took me a long time to mix the right gray, although I could have just diluted the black paint with water, but that's how I got it. Pretty light and neutral background for the fish, which will make the fish look brighter and more expressive. I wanted to splash some drops like that on it. They will spread out, but I just show you possibilities. So I continue to paint the border in this same gray color, gradually making it darker. To keep the paint from drying and leaving halos, you should paint it in both directions. It's necessary to paint well under the buttons so that no light spots are left. If halos remain, they can be covered with darker paint before they dry. It's a pencil mark, and I don't want to leave it as it is. I take a textile marker and overlap the pencil. And with the brush I repeat the pattern of imperial angelfish stripes. Some lines come out brighter, some paler. On the other hand, I take a gray marker to overlap the pencil, and I drew stripes with it. The marker can add accents to your experimental quadrants. Or you can do it with textile paint. I don't really like those dots. I overlap them. We could have stopped here, but I wanted to make the composition more closed, so I decided to repaint the border in purple. But first I will do it in a small area, so I will limit this area with the resist. And I think I like it better that way, so I'm going to paint over all the margins. Here's an important point. In the areas of the pins, hooks and clips, make sure you have painted everything carefully. Especially in the hemline. The clips can be unhooked and painted underneath and then reattached again. Here I want to show you another technique, which I invented in this video. I really like putting the dots with cotton buds. You even can draw the eye with it. There will be links in the description to all the videos mentioned here. I left the artwork for 2 days until the paints were completely dry. Now the silk can be removed from the frame. And it has uneven edges now. Here were buttons, hooks, and here tapes and hooks. It takes at least 4 minutes of ironing for the paint to stick to the silk, but on the back side, because sometimes the resist sticks to the iron. The iron is in silk mode. Now we need to rinse the silk and see how well the paints hold on it. Here I have a cool water and I added some hair shampoo. The silk needs to be handled delicately. It should not be twisted. I just shake it in the water for about 3 minutes. If you don't have a special detergent for silk and wool, then shampoo will do well. And this is the first rinse. It's actually better to do it in the sink under running water. And that's what I'm going to do now. Since my silk is rinsed well, I use the towel to dry the silk and iron it again. If you like this video, I would really love your reaction to it. Silk is best ironed while it's wet. I smooth the silk so that there are no uneven edges from the hooks. I pull the edge out a little while I'm ironing. So, my mistakes. I should have painted the edges more carefully, especially the hemmed one. Outline the pattern with the fading marker or exactly repeat the pencil pattern. Do resist more slowly so that there are no such leaks. I'd love if you write in the comments how your work turned out, what was easy for you and what was difficult. Maybe you have questions, you can leave them below and I'll try to answer.